Have you ever walked out of an interview feeling like everything went perfectly, only to receive a rejection email a few days later? You answered every technical question. You connected well with the interviewer. You even felt confident about your experience. Then they asked one simple question: what are your salary expectations? And without realizing it, your answer may have ended the entire interview. Most career advice tells you to avoid giving a number. Some people say to always ask for more. Others tell you to refuse to answer until you receive an offer. But here's what almost nobody tells you. I've spent years seeing hiring decisions from the employer's side, and I can tell you this question isn't a trap. It's not designed to trick you into accepting less money. It's designed to answer one simple question: can we realistically work together? The wrong answer doesn't just affect your paycheck. It can make recruiters question your preparation, your confidence, and even whether you're the right fit for the role. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why employers ask about salary expectations, the mistakes that instantly damage your chances, and the three answers that experienced recruiters actually respect. Because the goal isn't just getting the interview, it's getting the offer. Before we begin, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been asked about your salary expectations during an interview? How did you answer? Share your experience in the comments. I read everyone, and your story might help someone else prepare for their next interview. Number one. Why recruiters really ask about your salary expectations. Let's clear up one of the biggest myths in hiring. Most candidates believe recruiters ask about salary because they're trying to pay you as little as possible. That does happen at some companies, but for most professional employers, that's not the real reason. The truth is much simpler. Hiring is expensive. Every interview requires time from recruiters, hiring managers, team leaders, and sometimes even executives. Companies don't want to invest hours or weeks interviewing someone if there's no realistic chance of reaching an agreement on compensation. Think about it this way. Imagine a position has an approved salary range of $80,000 to $95,000 a year. If a candidate expects $135,000, neither side is wrong. The candidate may genuinely be worth that amount based on their experience. But if the company has no flexibility in its budget, continuing the interview process only wastes everyone's time. That's why recruiters ask early. They're trying to determine whether your expectations fall somewhere within a range where both sides can win. There's another reason many candidates overlook. Recruiters aren't just thinking about today's offer, they're thinking about what happens after you're hired. Suppose they somehow convince you to accept a salary that's far below what you actually wanted. At first, you may say yes, but 6 months later, after discovering coworkers earn more or another company offers significantly higher pay, you'll probably leave. Now the company has lost months of training, productivity, and recruiting costs. No employer wants to repeat that cycle. Ironically, a fair salary often saves companies money in the long run. Good recruiters know that employees who feel fairly compensated tend to stay longer, perform better, and build stronger relationships with their teams. That's why salary expectations aren't just about money. They're about long-term compatibility. The best candidates understand this. Instead of treating the question like a battle, they treat it like the beginning of a professional negotiation. They're not trying to beat the employer. They're trying to find out whether the opportunity truly makes sense for both sides. And that's exactly the mindset recruiters respect. I'm curious, do you think companies should share the salary range first, or should candidates give their expectations first? Tell me which side you're on in the comments and explain why. Number two. The three answers that immediately hurt your chances. Now that you understand why recruiters ask this question, let's talk about what can quietly ruin an otherwise great interview. Surprisingly, it isn't always asking for too much money. In fact, some of the most damaging answers have nothing to do with the number itself. The first mistake is refusing to answer. You've probably heard advice like, "I'm not comfortable discussing salary until I receive an offer." While that may sound like a smart negotiation tactic, many recruiters don't see it that way. From their perspective, it creates uncertainty. If they have 10 qualified candidates and 9 of them provide a reasonable salary expectation, while one refuses to answer, who do you think is easier to move forward with? Recruiters don't expect you to know the exact number. They simply want enough information to determine whether you're generally aligned with the position. When you avoid the question completely, it can signal that you haven't researched the role, you're uncomfortable discussing compensation, or you're planning to dramatically increase your expectations later in the process. None of those impressions work in your favor. The second mistake is giving an unrealistic number. This can happen in two different ways. Some candidates ask for far more than the market supports because they believe negotiating always starts high. Others accidentally base their expectations on salaries from places like New York or San Francisco while applying for jobs in cities with a much lower cost of living. Recruiters notice this immediately. If your expectation is only slightly above their budget, they may still continue the conversation. They might adjust the position, improve the benefits package, or explore other options. But if your number is tens of thousands of dollars above what the company can realistically pay, they often conclude that there's simply no path to an agreement. At that point, even an excellent candidate may be removed from consideration not because they aren't qualified, but because the gap is too large. The third mistake surprises many people. It's pricing yourself far too low. Candidates often believe this makes them look humble or increases their chances of getting hired. But experienced recruiters may interpret it differently. They may wonder whether you fully understand the market. They may question whether you've researched the role. Or they may worry that once you discover your true market value, you'll quickly leave for a better paying opportunity. Well-managed companies also care about internal fairness. If the approved salary range starts at $75,000, they usually won't offer someone $55,000 simply because that's what the candidate requested. Doing so would create compensation problems across the organization. The lesson is simple. Recruiters aren't looking for the lowest number. They're looking for a realistic number, one that shows you've done your homework, understand your value, and are serious about building a long-term relationship, not just winning a negotiation. That's the kind of answer that builds confidence before you've even received an offer. Number 3. The 3 numbers you must know before every interview. Here's the mistake that causes most candidates to panic when they're asked about salary. They wait until they're sitting across from the interviewer before they start thinking about compensation. By then, it's already too late. The strongest candidates don't improvise. They prepare. And before every interview, they know 3 important numbers. The first is your market value. This isn't what your friend earns. It isn't what someone on social media claims they negotiated. And it certainly isn't the highest salary you can find online. Your market value is what employers are currently paying professionals with your level of experience, skills, certifications, and location. Location matters more than many people realize. A software engineer in Seattle may earn significantly more than someone doing the exact same work in a smaller city. An accountant in Chicago may have a different salary range than one in Kansas City. If you ignore geography, your expectations may be completely out of sync with the local market. Spend time researching reliable salary data before every interview. The more accurate your information, the more confidently you'll speak. The second number is the company's likely budget. Many candidates never even try to find this. That's a missed opportunity. Today, salary information is more available than ever. Job postings often include salary ranges. Sites like Glassdoor, Levels, for your information, Salary.com, and LinkedIn Salary can provide additional insight. Industry contacts and recruiters can also give you a realistic idea of what companies typically pay for similar positions. You don't need the exact number. You simply need to understand the range. When your expectations are supported by real market research, you sound professional instead of emotional, and recruiters can immediately tell the difference. The third number may be the most important of all, your walkaway number. This is the minimum compensation you can honestly accept while still feeling good about taking the job. Notice I said compensation, not just salary. Too many candidates focus only on the base pay, but a complete compensation package includes much more. Health insurance, retirement contribution, annual bonuses, stock options, paid vacation, remote work flexibility, professional development. Even a shorter commute can have real financial value. Sometimes a company offering a slightly lower salary actually provides a better overall package. Other times, a high salary comes with long hours, expensive health insurance, limited vacation, and little room for advancement. That's why experienced professionals evaluate the entire offer, not just the first number they see. Once you've calculated your walkaway number, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating from fear. You stop saying yes simply because you're worried another opportunity won't come along. Instead, you negotiate with clarity. You know exactly what works for you. And just as importantly, you know when it's time to respectfully walk away. That confidence is something recruiters notice immediately because candidates who understand their value tend to communicate more clearly, negotiate more professionally, and make better long-term career decisions. Let me ask you this. What's more important to you, a higher salary or a better overall benefits package? Drop your answer in the comments. There isn't one right answer, and I'd love to hear how you think about it. Number 4. Best answer has shown, give a clear and confident number day. After all this preparation, here's the first answer that experienced recruiters genuinely appreciate. A clear, confident number, not a vague response, not an apology, not 5 minutes of explaining why you deserve it. Just a professional answer backed by research. For example, you might say, based on my experience, the responsibilities of this role, and my research on the local market, I'm looking for a salary around $95,000. That's it. Simple, direct, confident. Notice what this answer does. It tells the recruiter you've done your homework. It shows that your expectation isn't random or emotional. And perhaps most importantly, it creates an anchor for the conversation. Negotiations almost always begin from the first credible number placed on the table. If your number is reasonable and supported by market data, you've established a strong starting point without sounding demanding. Now, some candidates worry they'll accidentally ask for too much. Here's what recruiters often do behind the scenes. If your expectation falls slightly above their budget, but you're clearly one of the strongest candidates, they may not reject you immediately. Instead, they start exploring options. Can they move you into a higher salary band? Can they increase the signing bonus? Can they offer additional vacation? Can they speed up your first performance review? Companies are often more flexible than candidates realize, but they can only explore those options if they know what you're actually looking for. On the other hand, if you never give a number, they have nothing to work with. Confidence also communicates something beyond salary. It signals that you understand your professional value. There's a big difference between confidence and arrogance. An arrogant candidate says, I won't even consider anything below $120,000 because I know what I'm worth. A confident candidate says, based on my experience and my research, I believe around $120,000 would be appropriate for a role like this. See the difference? One invites a conversation. The other creates conflict. Recruiters are much more willing to negotiate with someone who sounds collaborative rather than confrontational. And remember this, if the recruiter responds by saying, that's a little above our range, don't panic. Don't immediately lower your number. Instead, stay curious. Ask questions. You might respond with something like, I appreciate you sharing that. Could you tell me more about the overall compensation package and whether there's flexibility depending on experience? Now you've kept the negotiation alive without giving away your position too early. That's exactly how experienced professionals handle compensation discussion. They don't argue. They don't apologize. They simply have a calm, informed conversation based on facts instead of fear. Number 5. Best answer #2 use market research to your advantage. Not everyone feels comfortable giving one exact number. Maybe you're changing industries. Maybe the responsibilities aren't completely clear yet. Or perhaps you found different salary estimates depending on where you look. In situations like these, there's an approach that recruiters often respect even more. Instead of naming a single number, present a well-researched salary range. For example, you could say, based on my research and similar positions in this area, I've found that professionals in this role typically earn between $85,000 and $95,000. From what I know about this opportunity, I believe that's a reasonable range. Does that align with the company's budget? That final question is incredibly powerful. Why? Because you've shifted the conversation from guessing to collaborating. You're no longer throwing out random numbers. You're demonstrating that you've done your homework while inviting the recruiter to confirm whether you're in the right ballpark. This does two important things. First, it shows confidence without sounding rigid. You're saying, here's what the market suggests, instead of, this is my demand. Second, it encourages the recruiter to share valuable information. If your range fits comfortably within their budget, they'll often tell you. If it's slightly high, they may explain where their range falls. Either way, you've learned something useful without creating unnecessary tension. There's another advantage to using a range. It gives both sides room to negotiate. Let's say your research suggests $90,000 to $100,000. The company may come back with $95,000. That's a successful conversation because both parties stayed within realistic expectations. Compare that to someone who immediately demands $110,000 without any supporting evidence. The discussion can end before it truly begins. One mistake to avoid, however, is making your range too wide, saying, I'm looking for anywhere between $70,000 and $120,000 doesn't demonstrate flexibility. It demonstrates uncertainty. Recruiters may wonder whether you understand the role or your own market value. A professional range should usually be relatively narrow. It should reflect careful research, not guesswork. And don't forget to explain why you chose that range. A single sentence can make all the difference. You might say, that range reflects my experience, current market data, and the responsibilities described in the job posting. Now your answer has credibility. You've connected your expectations to objective information instead of personal opinion. That's exactly what hiring managers want to hear. Because when candidates negotiate with facts instead of emotion, the conversation becomes easier for everyone. It feels less like a battle over money and more like two professionals working together to reach a fair agreement. Number 6. Best answer. #3. Ask for the salary range first. What if you're genuinely worried about naming the wrong number? Maybe the job description doesn't provide enough information. Maybe the role seems broader than you expected. Or maybe you're interviewing with a company known for paying above market. In those situations, there's a professional strategy that many experienced candidates use. Instead of guessing, ask about the company's salary range first. Notice I said ask professionally, not avoid the question. There's a big difference. You might say, I'd love to make sure we're aligned. Before I give a specific number, would you be willing to share the salary range the company has budgeted for this position? That's a reasonable question. In fact, many recruiters appreciate it because it moves the conversation toward transparency. If they share the range, you've instantly gained valuable information. Now you can compare it with your own research and respond confidently. For example, if they say the position pays between $88,000 and $98,000, you could reply, that aligns well with my expectations. Based on my experience, I'd expect to be somewhere toward the upper end of that range. Simple, professional, and supported by logic. But what if the recruiter doesn't want to reveal the range? That happens sometimes. Don't become defensive. Don't insist. And definitely don't refuse to answer. Instead, transition smoothly. You could respond, I understand. Based on my research and experience, I believe a salary around $95,000 would be appropriate. Although I'm open to discussing the full compensation package, see what happened? You asked a thoughtful question. When you didn't get the information you wanted, you still answered confidently. That demonstrates flexibility without sacrificing professionalism. The key is that you're participating in the conversation, not trying to control it. Recruiters notice candidates who are easy to negotiate with, not because they accept anything, but because they communicate clearly, listen carefully, and stay focused on finding a solution that works for both sides. That's exactly the impression you want to leave. Remember, salary negotiations aren't about winning. They're about reaching an agreement where both you and the employer feel confident moving forward. The best negotiators understand that. They ask smart questions. They listen more than they argue. And they always keep the conversation respectful. Those qualities often leave a stronger impression than the salary discussion itself. Have you ever asked an employer to share the salary range first? Did they answer or did they turn the question back to you? Let everyone know in the comments because your experience could help someone preparing for their next interview Number 7, the biggest salary negotiation mistake most candidates make. After helping hire countless employees, I've noticed one mistake that destroys more opportunities than almost anything else. It's not asking for too much. It's not asking for too little. It's changing your expectations at the very end of the hiring process. Imagine this. During the first interview, you tell the recruiter you're looking for around $85,000. Everyone moves forward with that understanding. The hiring manager likes you. The team likes you. The company spends weeks interviewing you, checking references, and preparing an offer. Then the offer arrives. Suddenly you say, "Actually, I've decided I won't accept anything below $105,000. Can you do that?" Of course, no one is forcing you to accept an offer, but understand how it looks from the employer's perspective. They may begin to wonder, was this candidate being honest from the beginning? Will they keep changing expectations after they're hired? Can we trust what they tell us? At that point, the issue is no longer just money. It's trust. And trust is incredibly difficult to rebuild once it's been damaged. Now, let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with adjusting your expectations if something meaningful has changed. Maybe you learned the role includes significantly more responsibility than originally described. Maybe you've received another legitimate offer, or perhaps the compensation package turned out to be very different from what you expected. Those are valid reasons to reopen the discussion. The key is transparency. Instead of surprising the employer at the last minute, explain why your expectations have changed. For example, as I've learned more about the scope of this position and the level of responsibility involved, I believe a salary closer to $95,000 would better reflect the value of the role. Is there flexibility to discuss that? That's a completely different conversation. You're providing context, you're showing respect, and you're inviting discussion instead of issuing an ultimatum. Professional negotiations are built on consistency. If you communicate honestly from the beginning, employers are much more willing to work with you when circumstances change. Because negotiation isn't about hiding information until the perfect moment. It's about building enough trust that both sides feel comfortable reaching an agreement. The candidates who receive the best offers usually aren't the loudest negotiators. They're the most prepared. They understand the market. They know their value. They communicate clearly. And they remain consistent throughout the entire hiring process. Ironically, that's what gives them the strongest negotiating position. Not games, not pressure, not clever tactics, just preparation, honesty, and confidence. Those qualities don't just help you negotiate a better salary. They help you build the kind of professional reputation that opens doors for years to come. The next time you're asked, "What are your salary expectations?" remember this. The interviewer isn't looking for the perfect number. They're looking for a professional who understands their value, communicates honestly, and approaches negotiation with confidence instead of fear. Don't avoid the question. Don't guess. And don't play negotiation games that damage trust before you've even joined the company. Do your research. Know your market value. Understand your walkaway number. And be ready to have an open, respectful conversation. Because salary negotiation isn't about squeezing every last dollar out of an employer. It's about creating a partnership where both sides feel they're making the right decision. The best careers aren't built on one negotiation. They're built on a reputation for preparation, integrity, and professionalism. If you can master this one interview question, you'll walk into every future negotiation with more confidence, not just for your next job, but for every opportunity that follows. If you found this video helpful, let me know by hitting the like button. It tells me to create more career advice like this. And if you're serious about getting better at interviews, negotiating higher salaries, and building a career that gives you more freedom and more opportunities, make sure you subscribe because that's exactly what we talk about here every week. Finally, I have one question for you. What's the best salary negotiation advice you've ever received or the biggest mistake you've made? Share it in the comments below. Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs before their next interview. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.